Good evening, everyone. This is the overview and scrutiny panel for March, so welcome. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Gardner and Councillor Jennings.
Thank you. Minutes of last meeting.
So within the pack, you've had the minutes of the meeting from the 31st of January. Are there any comments or questions on that, or are we happy for the chair to sign those? Yep. Thank you.
Item 2, members' interests.
Yes, it's a bit tenuous, I think, but just for completeness, item 7, a close family friend, we holiday together and socialise together, but works on a couple of the markets. So just for completeness, I'll bring it up.
Item 3, response to questions that were outstanding from last time.
So again, within the pack, we've had responses to questions arising from the previous meeting, and that's just to note, unless anybody has any questions. So, Councillor Pickering?
Yeah, so my question, which is on the corporate performance report, so it's noted as a request to adjust the layout to enable a one-page view, which wasn't what I was asking for at all, actually. It was about trying to merge the sections, so where we have like 3 or 4 appendices, it's trying to bring the sections together so that the relevant sections are grouped with each other, so when you read them together, so you read them together rather than having to go to the appendices. So it was nothing to do with trying to get it onto a single page, which I appreciate would be completely unrealistic.
Right, so apologies, that's obviously my misunderstanding of the question, but I think Dan is sat behind you. I don't like to put him on the spot, but he's the person that does put that report together. So I don't know if you're able to shed any light on that, Dan, whether that would be possible.
Am I on? I think I'd misunderstood the question from watching it on YouTube myself. In terms of the question you're asking now, we have looked at doing that. We did a version of the first quarterly report shaped in that format, so you had all of the outcome 1 actions, indicators and projects together, then you moved on to outcome 2, etc. Trialled that internally just with some officer colleagues, and they didn't find it easier to use. In fact, I think it was the opposite. They found it easier to look at the graphs together and get a sense of what they're showing for the performance metrics, rather than sort of flitting between a table on actions, a graph section, and then a table of projects. But we're happy to seek some more feedback, and perhaps I'll have a chat with you outside the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. That's really helpful. Thank you. Are we finished? There's still one question outstanding, isn't there? But we'll follow that one up. Okay. Overview, item 4, overview and scrutiny work programme.
So again, within the pack, we have the overview and scrutiny work programme and the notice of key decisions for the coming months. Are there any comments or questions on that item? No. Oh, sorry, Councillor Corney.
Just the Market Towns programme, it's obviously unscheduled and pending further details, but do we have any idea of when that's likely to start coming through? Obviously, it's quite a big item, isn't it? So,
my understanding is that I think we're due a spring update, but we can certainly take that up with Councillor Wakeford later. I will actually give him a call on that and see where we are with it. Thank you. Item 5. Item 5, corporate plan.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to bring you the latest version of the corporate plan. I can't take credit for having done the artwork or the hard work. Dan Buckridge, sat next to me, is responsible for that. And I'm going to hand across to Dan to present, and then happy to take any questions, comments or observations that you'd like to share with us.
Thank you. I'm just going to run through the process of the refresh this year. So the focus was on the action plan and the operational performance measures for next year, 24-25, but we did take the opportunity to propose a couple of minor amendments. One was to a priority and one was to an outcome, with the intention of providing greater clarity on what we're seeking to achieve as a council. So that's covered under section 3.1 in the Cabinet report. Just to explain those a bit further, the sixth outcome is currently lowering our carbon emissions. And although the outcome statement in the current corporate plan does make it clear that this is about not just our own emissions and moving towards becoming a net zero carbon council, but also enabling and encouraging local people and businesses to reduce their carbon emissions across the district, we thought it'd be clearer if it just said lowering carbon emissions rather than take the word out of it. Our out of it. The other change to the priorities and outcomes was our third priority and our seventh outcome currently have the title Delivering Good Quality, High Value for Money Services with Good Control and Compliance with Statutory Obligations. Rather a long title, and it's felt that a shorter title, Doing Our Core Work Well, would help ensure our focus remains high on that key priority for the council, as it's a bit easier to remember. We believe it's still important to highlight the need for quality, value for money, compliance with statutory obligations and control. So we're suggesting that that's proposed as the name of the outcome, whilst the Doing Our Core Work Well becomes the priority instead. So none of those amendments are seeking to make any changes to how the council operates and what we're seeking to achieve. It's simply for clarity. So in terms of the actions updated this year, we're less than a year into delivering on the new corporate plan, but we've already completed a number of actions, as you'll be aware of from reports through to this panel. Many of the actions that are in the action plan for the current plan were always due to be delivered over multiple years or on an ongoing basis. So many of those remain in the corporate plan for next year. There have been some minor changes to wording, for example, saying that we're continuing to do things where this time last year we hadn't started yet. Where there's more significant changes to the actions, we've labelled them in your report as amended, and where there's new actions, they're labelled as new. And many of those new actions and the amendments we've had are following on from work this year, so sort of developed as a result of needs that have been identified through pilots and trials and work we've done, engagement activity we've done. So I think I'd describe this action plan as more of an evolution from last year than revolution. We've also added some information into the corporate plan this time on achievements so far. So for each outcome, there's a we said, we did section. It's not a comprehensive list. It doesn't cover the entire municipal year, as we're not fully through it yet. You'll be aware yourselves, as members of this panel, of much of the content from your previous reports, but we thought it'd be useful for other readers of the corporate plan to see what we've done. And we'll, of course, be bringing the Q4 performance report to you in June and to the Cabinet as well. Operational performance measures are mostly unchanged. They cover important services, and as we strive to deliver continuous improvement to meet our best value duties, we think it's important we retain a focus on those, and the council should continue to be sort of publicly held to account on those. And on that note, we're proposing to add some measures which the Office for Local Government is including in its local data explorer. So they're either already in there or will be soon, around residual household waste collected. That's waste that's not recycled, reused or composted. The weight per household for that. The number of fly tips reported and the number of enforcement actions relating to fly tips. So by including them in our own corporate plan, as well as having them reported on the Offlog website. We'll be transparent ourselves. We'll be reporting them more quickly than will come through on the Offlog website, and we'll also be setting ourselves targets that we'll be held to account against, and we're aiming to achieve. So that's a general summary of what's changed. I think with regards to this panel's remit, there's a few things in there that you'll be particularly interested in. So around growth, there's the action to continue developing the next corporate plan. There'll be a refreshed economic growth strategy for the district, and the corporate peer challenge is coming up in May. In terms of performance, we'll have the Q4 report coming through in June, and alongside that we'll be bringing you an item on targets that we're proposing for the operational performance measures in this corporate plan, and we'll be bringing a report on contextual outcome measures as well. I think that's my summary.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Chair, back to you, and happy to take any questions or comments that the committee would like us to consider.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. I think we all recognise this is an iterative process and that it will actually develop and grow and change as things develop. However, I'll open it to the floor. Are there any questions? Councillor Wells.
Can you just elaborate a little bit on what the fleet's decarbonisation plan would involve? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think you might have had already some of those details shared with you through the climate strategy work that we're doing, but some of our fleet, certainly there are opportunities to look at alternative fuels, and you'll know that we've done a pilot project, and there's also ongoing work to look at whether we can swap some of the fuel sources for our other vehicles. So it's an ongoing piece of work that tries to deal with our ambitions against the practicalities and challenges of an emerging technology, and the challenges that things like using HVO, the vegetable oil, is actually currently a little more expensive than it is using diesel, which is a little perverse. So that's an ongoing challenge to try and look at how we make sure that we are on the front foot. But I can certainly ask Councillor Davenport-Ray to come back with more detail, because it sits in her portfolio.
Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you, Chair. My points are concerning the operational performance measures, and I welcome that you're going to be providing sort of more in-depth data. But will this information feed through to the relevant areas that we look at? I'm homing in particularly on 5.2, the staffing and turnover and sickness levels. Will that actually be part of the report that we see on a quarterly basis at the Employment Committee? So we'll actually have more data to see.
There we are. Thank you. So we will be reporting those figures here, and they will continue to be reported to the Employment Committee. Whether you'll be getting any additional information, I'm not sure. I believe you've been asking for additional information out of that committee, so I'm sure HR have that in hand. They thought it would be useful to have this split of long-term and short-term sickness for this panel to help us understand what our performance is and where the issues lie, really. So a bit more detail here. Hopefully you'll get what you've been requesting at the Employment Committee as well.
Thank you. If I may, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Blackwell. That's been heard, and so it's been reflected, and I think that's a really important part of how we evolve going forward, is actually we should be looking at a range of data and then genuinely interrogating it to say, does it match what we think we're seeing? Does it tell us something different? And actually that benchmarking data, that contextual data will be really important, because it'll give us a sense of how we compare to our peers, and that'll help us understand whether we're doing something slightly better or different, or whether actually something is not as strong as some of our neighbours or others in the country. And then we can go and have the question, why? What's different? And actually that's really what we want to be doing, is we want to be using these indicators to drive the policy making and to actually do the sort of engaged brain, what do we know and understand, and to challenge ourselves. So yes, I would hope that you'd have the data that you would like. And if you haven't got the data as we go through this process, or you realise we've given you that data and there's something new you'd like, that's the conversation we really would welcome.
Councillor Cawley.
Thank you, Chair. I just have two points. I think it's a great piece of work. It looks great and full of lots of ambition and lofty ideas, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I think it's great. Page 12, the priority is improving quality of life for local people. Absolutely support that. We all do. The outcome I'm intrigued by. How do we manage to measure happiness is my question. I can understand, because when I look at what we'll do, what will enable and what will influence, again, all good things, but how do we know that will lead to happiness? Have we thought about how that might be measured? That's my first part of my question.
Shall I come in there? So there is actually an Office for National Statistics measure of happiness, which is available at district level. We intend to use that as a contextual measure. So it's not something that's completely within Huntingdonshire District Council's control. We will not be setting a target that the administration can be held to account on for that, but we will be reporting how we're doing on that measure. I think there's a series of other measures in the same data set on anxiety, well-being. There's a couple of others. They're in the contextual measures report we're planning to bring to you in June. So you see how we're doing. With the caveat that it's from a national survey, the data at district level is not particularly robust in terms of confidence intervals.
Sorry, can I just clarify that? Dan, are you saying that we're using national data that just relates specifically to Huntingdonshire, or are we doing it ourselves?
So it's a national survey, but there's results available at Huntingdonshire level from surveys. I think I've undertaken one myself recently, had it come through the door. So local residents telling you about their happiness and well-being and anxiety levels. That because it's a relatively small sample at this level, it's not as robust as when you look at the national figures. So there's a bit more variance in the results, but we'll still be able to have a good idea of how we're doing over a longer period and compared to the average.
Thank you. I mean, that's really useful to understand. That was kind of what I expected you to say, and I think at least it will be indicative. And I think we can take from that our influence will be played out in those stats. So thank you, and that's useful to understand. My other point was trying to read my own writing here. Lowering. It was under lowering carbon emissions, and sorry, I'm just going to have to find the page. I wrote it down here, page 23. There was something on there I wanted to. I just would like, and it's probably the wrong committee to be having this discussion given the other committee deals with this, but there was a lot of stuff on there in lowering carbon emissions, and I think it's right to have changed that because it makes perfect sense. There's a lot of stuff there that could lower emissions, but it doesn't seem very concrete. And I know this is probably still a work in progress, but I think we ought to be a little clearer in this action plan of what timescales we're working to. Are we talking 2040? Are we talking 2030? Are we talking 2050? Which are the key milestones that we're talking about nationally that many businesses are talking about? I just think it would help, again, give residents and certainly members a bit of a clue as to where we think we're going with some of this stuff. It's a small point, but I think it would just bring a bit more robustness personally.
Thank you. So in terms of where we're going, the direction of travel, I think that's set out in our climate strategy. And I believe there are reports going through, I'm not sure, it will be the other panel rather than this one, I guess, that we're going to give a good update on where we are with those. We'll also be reporting on some relevant indicators, including carbon emissions as part of the contextual measures to you. So we'll see where we're going with those. And these actions align quite closely with the action plan for that strategy. So we're delivering the things in 24-25 that we said we would in that action plan. There aren't necessarily dates against all of these, but you'll certainly be hearing about progress at Q1, and hopefully where it's not clear, it'll be set out.
Thank you, Dan, and I totally get that. I just think if this is going to be our action plan that's out there for the world and his wife to see, as it were, then it might be useful to have some overarching sort of timescales, just to help people see that. I mean, we see it in all those other reports, I know, and we're geeks, we love all that. But just from that more general perspective, that's my thought.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment, really. What would have been useful, I think, is not only to know the successes, but also know what problems and what didn't happen from last year's corporate report. For us, there might be things. I had to go back to last year's report to see what did happen, what didn't happen, what has carried over, what hasn't carried over. It would have been useful just to have a section in here to say, give an update of these targets weren't met, we've carried them over to this year because we think they weren't achievable last year, but because of this reason they would be achievable this next year. Or maybe it's not a target anymore, or something changed within the year. It would have been quite handy just to have a reflection on the last year's performance, so we can look through a bit easier rather than having to go through multiple documents to get to this stage.
So thank you very much, Councillor Martin. I was just checking before I pronounce something that's not right. I think if it's not part of the Q4 reporting, the answer is it could be, because I think that's right. I think this is probably not the right document to do it, but actually I think you're entirely right. We do need to know what we're rolling forward, if we're going to roll something forward, or what we're going to stop if we're going to stop it, or actually sometimes things don't start because actually the world moves, which is why this should be a live document. So I think probably Q4 is the quarterly update is a good place to flag those significant changes so that actually you are able to follow what the progress looks like and to be able to quite rightly engage and question and challenge that. So I think that's something we'll take away and have a think about.
Are there any other questions? Oh, Councillor Slade.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's loads of really good stuff in here, but my question's about comms, really. So have we got a comms plan that kind of a line that fits alongside this to promote some of the stuff that is going on? And I'm talking about kind of a comms plan that is all about kind of some of the outreach, face-to-face stuff, as well as kind of working with parishes and press and online, like that kind of blended mixture.
So fantastic question and very timely, because I actually had that conversation this afternoon with Michael Hann, who leads our press and communications team, and the answer is yes. And this year's work plan internally matches that corporate plan. So in other words, there's a direct read through from the things that are in here to the things that are planned and forecast as activities to be communicated. And you're right, it's making sure we're getting those messages out at every level, but also to the right people at the right time. So yes, that's being looked at. Again, it's a new and different way of working, and one that's very welcome, but I suspect will be iterative as we go through the year. And certainly I think the feedback that Michael and his team would appreciate is, how's that landing? Are we getting the messages out to the right people at the right time in a way that actually is useful in terms of the information they receive? So brilliant question. And as I say, fortunately, I'd had that conversation just this afternoon as I'd looked at that internal plan with Michael.
That's great, thanks. And I think it's useful to kind of bring those parishes on that journey with you. So working with the clerks and some of the smaller parishes to kind of tell those good stories and make them feel involved.
I was only going to say, Chair, if I might abuse my position slightly. One of the things I think is really important in here that I really would like the overview and scrutiny to be aware of is the fact that we're looking already at the stuff that the Office of Local Government will be bringing on board, Offlog, as it's referred to. This is really proactive because Offlog is brand new as a new bit of government infrastructure. We know that those measures we're starting to hear communication about the sort of measures it's going to be asking local authorities. I think we might be one of the first in the country to actually have decided we're just going to get on and collect that data anyway. So that, in other words, we're on the front foot. We're not going to wait for them to say, and now officially, please, would you collect this data? So we're being really proactive and we're building that into our data collection. Some of it is information we would naturally have wanted or have been collecting. Some of it is information we might not have quite expected government to ask in the way that it's asked for it. But actually, we're trying to be really proactive so that we are on the front foot with that information, and we are able to then look at, as they publish their collected information and their benchmarkings, we're in a good place to actually take advantage of that. So I think it's worth Overview and Scrutiny knowing that's a really proactive approach, and I suspect we might be a very rare authority in the sense of I suspect others are not necessarily grasping that quite so early in the conversations.
Thank you, Councillor Conboy. I think it's great. I think actually we discussed this with Oliver when he was last at the committee, and I did raise the issue of, obviously staff time and being able to collect all this additional information, because I can understand how onerous the whole thing can be. So obviously, just to make sure that we have enough resources and staff can actually do this additional work. So that's certainly a concern I would have in terms of risk management. Are there any other questions? Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Dan, for your time. Item 6, finance.
Good evening, everyone. I will start just by updating you all on why we're looking at Q3 finance reports in March. We did speak to the chair to postpone this item from February, but we didn't tell everyone else. So probably a good point to pick that up now. Because January becomes a little bit of a maelstrom with the finances, what we did observe last year is that we were publishing the budget and the MTFS, and the numbers within that were then different from the numbers that were being given in the Q3 report, because the budget is set against the Q2 report because of the timescales and when the government actually tell us the draft award for the financial year. So we noticed that was a little bit of a problem last year. It's also then just creating a huge amount of additional work and stress and strain, and that obviously leads to potential errors, and what we'd like to do is to remove that. It also gives the panel an awful lot of finance to digest in one go. So with all of that in mind, it was decided to postpone the Q3 review from February through until March now. It does mean that you get almost a non-stop stream of finance, as what we're hoping to do is to bring the commercial property item next month as well, depending on whether the timescales will allow that or not. So it does mean that you're going to get a nice even tick over of the finance side of things, depending on how we make that schedule look. But I also think it's more manageable. It's fairer on the officer team, and it's probably fairer on you in terms of where the numbers all are. So I'm delighted that I have the subject matter experts, because my mind's a little bit blown by finance at the moment. I'll hand across to Karen.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. As Brett has just outlined, the figures that we are presenting are based on our forecast on the actual figures up to the end of December, so 9 months of actuals plus our forecast for the remaining 3 months. Anything I seem to have looked at the moment which relates to SEPFA has the message that we should be doing boring really well. So I'm very pleased to say that our Q3 forecast is only different to our Q3 forecast net expenditure by £179,000. So everything is continuing pretty much as we expected in the Q2 forecast. no, one thing you can guarantee with forecasting is you will never get it exactly right. So if I came back here and said there was no change, you would know I was lying. The reason for the continuing high, the underspend is we continue to get slightly higher than expected receipts on our bank balances. And there's a number of minor underspends across most areas. But there is a small drop in one leisure income, and Greg has included reasons for that within the report. I guess the most significant change you'll see in the forecast is that we moved 850,000 provision from corporate resources across to operations. This is not an overspend in operations. It was merely that in the Q2 forecast we provided for the costs of implementing the garden waste subscription service, and at that point we provided for them under corporate resources. However, looking at accounting treatments going forward, that income will be reflected to the operations budget, so we aligned the provision of those costs with that. So as I said, no, it's not that we have a big overspend in operations, it's purely an accounting treatment aligning a provision that we've made in Q2. That's pretty much all I wanted to say on the revenue budget. If I look at the capital budget, same thing. As we've always said, we're forecasting an underspend. This is due to delays in projects, predominantly around the Market Town programme. That is progressing well. We are still forecasting to complete our projects in line with the grant requirements, so there's no risk of losing funding there, and that's a key focus of the Market Programmes team. And in addition, Hinchinbrook Country Park, the programme there has been delayed because there are additional survey requirements. But other than that, again, capital is pretty much as we've been predicting previously. If I have a look at the further reports across our commercial investment property, we do have a few vacancies at the moment. We're continuing to liaise with agents to try and promote these and get these resolved. I'm very pleased to say, no, as I said earlier, this report is based upon information that we had back in January. The Fareham properties, which have been a big activity this year to upgrade and refurbish, I'm pleased to say there's increased activity around these now with, as of last week, one party showing an interest in renting an entire building, and then 3 further parties who were interested in a floor each of the second building. Now, it's early days. I'm not promising it's going to happen, but it's good that we've got interest actually in all this space that we have down there, and it shows that what we're doing is the right thing. And finally, we've included the prudential measures. Again, you could tell from the upside we got in the revenue budget that our investments are doing well. I brought Ollie along, so if you've got any detailed questions on this, I will pass you over to Oliver because he lives and breathes all this information. Happy to answer any questions people have on the report.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks very much for the update. Yeah, the points you raised, I certainly picked it up on the report. Are there any, Councillor Pickering?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, and thanks particularly for mentioning the Fareham office properties, which I was going to ask about. So firstly, I was wondering whether the refurbishment is complete now, or whether that's still ongoing. And the other thing was to ask more generally, actually, about the vacant properties that we seem to have across our portfolio, and whether that's a particular cause for concern, given that list seems to be increasing, I think. So yeah, just wondering generally whether there's concern really about the vacancies and obviously the reduction in income that's resulting from that.
So if I touch first of all on the Fareham properties, they are pretty much complete. We're just on to snagging information now. And I'm very pleased to say also that the programme of works came in within budget. So yeah, huge thanks to both my commercial estates team and my facilities management team who have been working on delivering that programme. The commercial property, it's always a concern when we have a void, but there's nothing wrong with the properties. We're just waiting for the right tenants to come along at the moment. And there is still passing interest, and say we're working with the agents and we're making sure that what we're advertising the units for and the rent is in line with market conditions. But if the client is a future tenant isn't out there, it's not that we're losing those tenants to other buildings. It's just it's a quiet. There's still uncertainty in the market, and we will get the tenants in there. It's not an issue with these buildings. It's just we don't have the right tenants coming through at the moment.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 points, if I may. Do you want me to go through one at a time, or? Okay, so 3.2, you've said that Hinchbrook Country Park, there's been an unexpected increase in the income. Can you tell us a bit more about what's brought that about, please?
So the unexpected increase at Hinchbrook Country Park, I think, is all down to the cafe and the work that they've been doing, particular things around their Christmas events, with the, I think it was Santa Paws, which sold out incredibly quickly. But yes, they do seem to be generating an awful lot more trade going through there, and that is certainly helping the budget.
Thank you. Is there any extra income then, that if they're doing these successful events, is there anything else that we can run throughout the year to try and generate even more? Or?
I think the team are looking at that, but it does come down to resources and capacity to deliver these things.
Thank you, Chair. 3.5, where we're looking at the debtor age in days, there's quite a bit of commercial rent that is over a year old. What are we doing to recover that money?
I knew you would ask me this. I can guess an answer, but I'd like to go away and check it with the team, so I'll come back to you on that one.
Thanks, Karen. And then my final question is 4.3. Just picking up on what Marcus was saying. What incentives do we offer to fill the units that are currently empty? And is there anything else that we could offer?
So for new tenants coming in, we typically look at offering rent-free periods. It depends on how much investment they need to do in the building, and also on the client themselves.
I'd just like to add a point to that one, just to give it a little bit of confidence in terms of the negotiations with potential tenants, or even tenants who are looking to renegotiate rentals, or when rent review periods become or when the calendar comes round and those rent reviews are required. We are being extremely robust. We are looking for the best possible commercial outcomes for the council and our taxpayers, and we are. I think there is a little bit of an expectation from people that a council will roll over and have its tummy tickled, and that's most definitely not where we are. So we are being extremely robust and making sure that the best value conversation is our interest, not the tenant's interest from a commercial point of view. That said, we are extremely good landlords. We make sure that our buildings are dealt with well. Any maintenance or snagging or problems just with general quality are dealt with as quickly as is possible.
Thank you for that. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a question about service group street cleansing. It says that there's loss of income due to place for people, which we know about. But the comment that I've got a question about is that it says struggling to meet standards whilst achieving £80,000 saving target from SLT. Could we get a bit of an update on that and how the loss of the contract is changing those 80,000 savings that SLT are asking for?
So the £80,000 saving target was part of the current year's MTFS, and that was prior to the contract being lost with Places for People. So that service is being looked at to make sure that we have the right capacity to deliver the service going forwards.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Slade.
Sorry, Brett, I'm going to pick on you, unfortunately, and your comment about looking after our estate. And so this is one of the eyesores in St Neots at the moment, and mainly because I work around the corner from there. So I've got an office that around from the Rowley Arts Centre, and there's a couple of empty units. There's one that's been empty since 2021, and then one that's been empty for a year. The one that's been empty for 3 years has got wooden panels across 3 broken windows. I've had to kind of deal with some of the alarm issues that have gone off, and then some of the street scene has now been started to be damaged where some of the bollards have been knocked over, and it's quite a state. So I'm just thinking, well, I've had residents asking me questions about it, and so it would be, and I'm saying, yeah, we are dealing with it. I'm kind of towing that line and saying we're doing what we can, but I think it'd be useful to kind of make some of those kind of changes to the building so we can, making sure that actually we are looking after the estate, and it will attract those tenants, potential tenants.
So I think because of the position we are with those buildings, it would be best to have that conversation next time around in the closed session. I think revealing anything that is ongoing would put us in a commercial disadvantage.
Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Karen, and more questions on referring to the commercial properties. First point is the table, please, on page 76. Just asking if you could explain it insofar as the numbers. Oh, okay. It's section 3, yes. Okay. Can I continue? Okay.
Yes, I'm there. Okay, so I guess the question is which particular part of the table. So this is showing the volume of units that we have, and generally the movements in those properties as to how many are void and how many have been relet and how many we've renewed leases on.
Thank you. Being more specific, the number of lettable units is 186. Should that be a total of the numbers below? Because I believe you're 2 out, which makes me concerned that we have a further 2. I've totaled the figures as 184. Yeah, 184. Thank you.
So it may be that we have 2 units which actually we let as a single unit, but I will go back to the service and get clarity on this one.
And just a second point, sorry, I know we're labouring this hard, and I don't know the answer to this, but typically how long do we keep a void? Because I think if we were in perhaps a private owner or private business, we would be considering measures either to sort of limit, damage limitation here. And I just heard somebody mention 2021 was when it was last occupied. Be interested in the strategy. Thank you.
It's quite interesting as you look across the portfolio, and I think again when we need to work out with our timings, because we had to postpone our Treasury management meeting, but as you look at the portfolios, some of the properties actually have wait lists where people want units if they become available, and an empty property is not always a bad thing commercially. Sometimes, and this sounds counterintuitive, but it is worse to let a unit than it is to leave it void because of the impact it will have on other parts of other contracts within that estate. And we've got a couple of situations where certain contracts are set in a certain way that if we were to let, it would be commercially disadvantageous to us because of the rates that people are asking or are offering us at the moment. Again, this is where you need to start getting into some of those details. I don't really want to do that outside of a commercial. It puts it at a commercial disadvantage if I were to talk about it any further at this point. But it seems counterintuitive. That is the situation we find ourselves in on a very small number, just a couple of those units.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just going to the capital programme, I see in the disabled facilities grants that there's a forecast overspend of 217,000. I just remember from our last meeting when we were going through the performance report, we're not reaching our target on these grants going through and the work being done. So I'm just wondering, this 217,000 overspend, is this because we're doing more projects than expected, or is it because of the change from Chorus Homes to PFP? It would just be useful to know where this overspend is coming from and why.
I'll have to go and talk with the service on that one and come back to you with the detail on that.
Are there any other questions on this? Thank you very much for your time, Karen and Brett. It's been helpful. Sorry if we've put you under the hammer a little bit on the commercial property stuff. So I'll move on to item 7, amended fees and charges.
So I'm bringing a revised fees and charges schedule to overview and scrutiny. This is a budget supporting schedule, and after we brought the budget through overview and scrutiny and council, we spotted that there was an omission of a number of fees. So we revised the schedule. The revisions are all highlighted in green, and I'm being a bit pedantic that it needs to come back to you to be scrutinised before it can be taken through to our fees and charges from April onwards.
Yes, I do remember actually it was raised. Are there any other points on this? Councillor Pickering.
Yeah, sorry, can you just clarify, these were fees that were omitted altogether from the previous, because some of them show no change, so it's just that those lines were omitted, is it?
That's correct. They were omitted, and some of these are statutory fees where we don't actually get to increase them in line with inflation, or whether it's whatever the fee is set as being, but we do need to have it on our schedule to be able to charge it.
And sorry just to labour it, but is there a reason why they were omitted, and are we taking steps to make sure we don't make the same mistake next year?
It was down to human error, and yes, it has been noted.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you everyone for your time and effort. We've come to the end of the agenda, so the meeting is closed. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.